Hey guys, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to Total War Warhammer. Today I'm going to be giving you a full rundown of the Skaven Army roster in the first of my sponsored series of army guides of all of the new factions in the sequel to the first Total War Warhammer game. During my campaign playthrough of the Skaven, I found that they're this unique mix of meat shields that are so cheap to repair after the battle, with ridiculous technology, fantastic artillery, and some of the most unique large units that I've ever played in a Total War game. And hopefully by the end of it, you will be able to tell the difference between a clan rat, a rat ogre, your doom wheels, and also your hell pit abominations. So firstly, let's take a look at the two lords of the Skaven campaign. Number one, Queek Headtaker.
I am right paw.
And it looks like we can see exactly where he gets his name by his trophies on top of his back. Queek is heavily armored, pierces armor effectively, and he's anti-infantry, so he can go toe-to-toe with entire units of your opponents. However, he is also a duelist, and what this means is that he's very efficient at attacking lords. And so sometimes the best thing to do is to use his Verminous Valor ability to knock back all of the meat shield and find the lord on the enemy team. Let's go get that princess. And we're going to use our Dwarf Gouger to increase our armor piercing capabilities. We're also going to use trophy heads, which you can only use on an enemy lord. And if you do that, that reduces their melee defense and also their melee attack significantly. And so that makes Queek a great assassin. However, if it's magic you're after, you might prefer Lord Skrolk.
Lord Skrolk!
Lord Skrolk is about as hideous as he is powerful at magic. Lord Skrolk has a variety of spells at his disposal. Firstly, Pestilent Breath. Where you activate it, it'll do a cone of damage. Next up, one of my favorite things is that he can summon a unit of clan rats wherever he wants on the battlefield. This can allow him to get some protection if the enemies are starting to close in on him, although he is still a decent melee combatant. Next, we're going to use my favorite ability that he has, and this is called Plague. And I love to do it just right over the blob. And these clan rats, they're not going to last forever, right? They've only been summoned to help out Skrolk. And wow, here we go. Okay, a spirit rat comes out, spreads the plague, all in a cone of horrible, disgusting AoE around him. And yeah, we can just see that they're absolutely melting. And who cares if we just sacrifice some clan rats? We summon them from nothing, right? There's always the opportunity to just summon some more. So now let's take a look at the infantry units of the Skaven. First up, the Skaven slaves. These are the main meat shield of the Skaven army. And also they have a useful ability called Expendable, which means that when they die or when they flee, that it doesn't have a negative effect on your allies' leadership, so they're not really going to be bothered if all of the slaves die. This makes them great at absorbing punishment, which allows you to protect your more vulnerable, expensive units. And I really enjoyed amassing Skaven slaves on lords inside the campaign map and using them to either target enemy cities that were just not protected at all, or alternatively taking over new ruins because they're just so cheap. Skaven slaves come in two varieties, as we can see, classic sword and also spears, with spears obviously being much better in Total War against large opponents. Next up, let's take a look at the clan rats. Clan rats are much more heavily armored than Skaven slaves, as I'm going to show you here. We can see that it's got 25 armor, whereas the slaves had none. Leadership's better, melee attacks up, melee defense, weapon strength, charge bonus, everything. And while the clan rats don't really have any special abilities, so to say, apart from still being a meat shield to encourage you to use them against more dangerous opponents, they are a definitive upgrade over the Skaven slaves and will become the mainstay of an early to mid army. And once again, they come in two varieties, with a sword and with a spear. However, maybe fielding countless numbers of meat shields is not quite your thing. Well, look no further than the Storm Vermin. These Storm Vermin are the elites of the Skaven infantry. They are armored and shielded, which protects them from all sources of damage apart from armor piercing. And as we can clearly see on the left-hand side of the screen, this is a gigantic upgrade. Their armor is 3 times as good as the clan rats. Their leadership is a third better. Their melee attack is 50% better, and their defense is twice as good as the clan rats, and so you definitely want to be replacing your clan rats with Storm Vermin later on in the campaign. But of course they are more expensive, and you better have the economy to back that up. And as with the Skaven slaves and the clan rats, they come in two varieties, sword and board and halberds. However, a lot of you might be disappointed right now thinking, well, these rats just aren't quite filthy enough for me, and if you like to get down and dirty, then the Plague Monks might be right up your street. The Plague Monks are a definitive damage upgrade over the Clan Rats, although they have to sacrifice pretty much 50% of the armor to be able to get this, and their unit size is smaller as well. Plague Monks are anti-infantry, and they're also a damage dealer, and they've also got a frenzy ability, which means that as long as their leadership is over 50%, they are much more efficient in combat than your other Skaven military units. Plague Monks are a great choice for the offensive player who want to use them to take out the more vulnerable areas of their opponent's army, but be warned, these things die incredibly quickly to ranged unit, and archers are just going to butcher Plague Monks before they even manage to get into close quarters. And so don't replace all of your meat shields, that's for sure. And if you absolutely must have the most horrible and damaging units on the battlefield, then here we go, it is the Plague Monk Censer Bearers. The Plague Monk Censer Bearers are a definitive upgrade over the Plague Monks, and they can also give the Storm Vermin a run for their money. These units have sensors filled with warpstone dust and contagious diseases, so it's no wonder they do so much damage in close quarters combat, and the best aspect about them is that they're armor piercing as well, so they can take on heavily armored enemy units, which Storm Vermin, for example, will have a really hard time to get through. Let's take a look at the final melee unit, Death Runners. What's special about Death Runners is they get Vanguard deployment, so they can deploy really close to the enemy lines at the start of the battle. Death Runners also have a Weeping Blade ability which devours enemy armor, and all it will take is a couple of slashes to get through the most heavily armored opponents. They've got Stalk as well, so they can remain hidden in any terrain, and they've also got Concealment Bombs, which when they drop, they will remain hidden, resulting in enemy armies walking completely past you, so you can wait to try and get to the back of their lines and assault them. Now let's take a look at some of the ranged units of the Skaven army. Firstly, the Skaven Slave Slingers. As they are Skaven slaves, they are expendable, so if you use these units, it doesn't matter. It doesn't affect the rest of your army's leadership. And while they're certainly not going to be doing much damage, Skaven Slave Slingers are dirt cheap, and early on in the campaign, you can use them to force the enemies to attack you, or alternatively throw wave after wave of expendable ranged unit to try and pick apart some of the weakly armored enemy. Now let's take a look at the Night Runners.
Now, ready.
The Night Runners have Vanguard deployment, so just like the Death Runners, you can deploy the Night Runners all the way up close to your enemy's lines. Night Runners are also ludicrously quick, so they can outrun elves easily with a speed of 48, while the elves are walking along at about 33. Night Runners also have the very useful ability of being able to fire while moving. And while they do tend to run out of ammunition quite quickly, they can be really good at harassing early on and put massive pressure over any army that fails to field cavalry or alternatively ranged units of their own. Night Runners can also use slings, but that prevents them from being able to fire on the move. But one of the useful things about the slings is their range is twice as long, as we can see 140 instead of 70. They've also got way more ammunition, over double, but deal significantly less missile damage than Night Runners without the slings. These units are best used for trying to outrun your opponents to force them into locations, and then pepper them with prolonged engagements, unlike your Night Runners without slings, who are likely going to just run out of ammunition and have to get so close to their opponents that they run risk of being engaged. Now let's take a look for the first time, but not the last time in this army guide, at Skaven ingenuity and their engineering at the Globadiers. Poisoned wind Globadiers throw poisoned wind globes, but what's actually inside their globes is warpstone gas, which makes it very efficient against armored units and large units as well. And one of the best thing about your poisoned wind Globadiers is they've actually got a lot of armor, 100 armor, and they can be incredibly useful later on in the campaign at dealing with some of the gigantic beasts of the Lizardmen army. Next up, let's take a look at the Warp Fire Throwers. These Warp Fire Throwers are some of the most brutal anti-infantry units in the game. And while they don't have much range, if you are not a well-armored unit, the last thing that you want to be is on the wrong end of a Warp Fire Thrower. Just look at what they're going to do to these elves as they advance towards us. A melty. Ah, and if you were to have some melee units in front now to take up the rest of this charge, you can see that you can just devour entire units in Warp Fire. And here's a little cheeky tactic that might be able to help you in the campaign. If you use your Lord to engage the enemies, then they're going to simply just sit there and fight him. And they're going to amass up in a big blob. And then let's just see what the Warp Fire Throwers do in this situation. Oh, yeah. I mean, sure, you're going to take maybe a little bit of damage on your Lord, but as long as he's got a reasonable amount of armor, and Queek has 110, your warp fire throwers are just going to be able to melt the enemy army around the Lord and barely do any damage to him. But be careful, because you cannot do this if your units don't have any armor whatsoever. Otherwise, you're going to cook them to a crisp in some horrible warp fire. Next, let's talk about gutter runners. These are the elite versions of your night runners, and their key ability is that they have a snare net. This is a short range throwing attack that will slow the target. It can be very useful for ambushing the front unit of your opponents, and just like your night runners, they're capable of firing on the move. They're naturally going to run and skirmish, and so this means when they get really close that they're going to throw nets on them, and then what you can do then is easily avoid the combat. Your rats are just so fast. And maybe, how about this, even give them some artillery fire on the slowed unit. Yeah, there we go. Nice combo kill. Skaven also have some of the most powerful artillery that I've ever played with in a Total War game. First up, the Plague Claw Catapult. This is fantastic for taking out blobs of infantry, and their missiles are just as good, irrelevant if the enemy is armored. Getting hit by the Plague Claw Catapult is going to ruin anybody's day, and you can really soften up your opponents before they get close to you. The Plague Claw Catapult is also incredibly useful for assaulting during a siege battle. You can take out the enemy's towers, you can take out their gates, which will allow you to easily be able to win your siege battles if you take enough of them in. Personally, for me, I took about 4 Plague Claw Catapults into every battle because it just provides you with so much flexibility. And if you press your insert key, you can go into manual fire mode, and it's lots of fun. Oh, well, not so much fun if you're a massive potato like me and you can't aim. However, if you aim properly, oh yeah, oh look at those elven corpses, oh yes, that's what every Skaven commander wants to see, right? So now let's take a look at another ingenious Skaven design. This is the Warp Fire Cannon, and it is a very powerful artillery, especially against large units. Now, while it is okay against infantry, this thing is designed for taking down monsters, just like that dragon that we can see approaching our lines. So let's organize, let's order all of our cannons to fire at that dragon and see how much damage we shave off his health point pool. So he looks like he's lost about a quarter in a couple of volleys from 4 lightning cannons. And they're also incredibly long range, as we can see 430 range there. And even if the large monster does come down and starts eating a few of your rats, that's why you've got lots of rats, right? You can continue to fire your warp lightning cannons at them, even in melee combat. And then look how fast that dragon's health point pool has gone down. Good by one of the most powerful elven units. So a lot of you might be sitting there thinking, why has he not shown us the Doom Wheel yet? Well, I'm not going to let you down, and I tell you what, Creative Assembly have not let us down, have they, with this model? It's one of the most beautiful looking things, I feel. Yeah, I guess if you like your Skaven kind of stuff. And if you're not a Warhammer fan, you might be wondering, well, why is it called the Doom Wheel? And that's because it's pretty much a super fast rolling wheel of death. When it does crash into the enemy lines, they're certainly going to hear about it. And that's not enough, right? The Doom Wheel also is able to fire lightning out of the front, out of the side, both of its sides, to the left and the right there. And that can make it ruthlessly efficient at just charging in, and it's also got armor-piercing capabilities, so it doesn't really matter what it's going to be engaging. It's also anti-infantry as well, so it does fantastic in blobs like these. And there's just something wonderful about just having loads of Doom Wheels in your army and charging them into your opponents. I think in the campaign, this is one of the most fun things that I did, was just to amass a load of Doom Wheels. And one thing that's great about them is they're so fast, going at 72 here, right into the enemy lines. You can chase down routing enemies. And you can also just sit them in front of melee units and kite them and fire ranged warp lightning at them. Certainly one of the best Skaven units, and I think it'll be a fan favorite. Now let's take a look at some of the monstrous units inside the Skaven army. How about the Rat Ogres? The Rat Ogre combines the agility of a rat with the monstrous, brutal power of an ogre, and these things are armor-piercing. They're fantastic for just crashing into the enemy lines, and they're also kind of a cavalry replacement for the Skaven. So when I was playing through the campaign, the Rat Ogres were my go-to for when you just wanted to have something really big and powerful to smash into the enemy lines. Now they're really good at just charging in and breaking up a tight formation. And one thing you can do is you can just force them to push through the enemy lines, and because they're so big, they can just squeeze through. Most of the smaller troops wouldn't be able to do this. Now, I will warn you that you will take a lot of damage by squeezing into the enemy lines like this, but once you do it, you kind of break their formation, and when you tell them to attack again, do you see that kind of rampage they went on there? It can be absolutely devastating. And if we were to charge something in right now, or just surround them with maybe some clan rats or some storm vermin, then we would really have these elves on the ropes. And also, one thing that's quite fun is that they just pick up their opponents and smash them around. Yeah, I really can't get around the fact that Creative Assembly have managed to create this game where there's thousands of units in a battle, yet when you zoom in, it just looks so gorgeous and there's so much interaction and cool little features. And now for arguably the most powerful unit in the Skaven army. This is the Hell Pit Abomination, and oh man, it lives up to its name. Look at those little rats on top of the model. Oh my word, its face looks like it's something out of a horror film. The Hell Pit Abomination is literally too horrible to die, and this means that whenever its health gets low to 10%, it just has a chance of regaining hit points. The monster is also armor piercing, so it can deal with pretty much everything. It causes terror as well, and as if that wasn't enough, it has regeneration. What this means is that if you go in, you take some damage, and you want to get out, then you're going to be able to slowly regain your health points back to go in again. Now, if you want to counter the Hell Pit Abomination, just use some fire. That's going to cook it up, a great way to cancel that regeneration. The Hell Pit Abomination is a great tool to keep in your army, just for when you don't really have a counter for anything. Just throw them in. They're an absolute tank. As long as the enemies don't have anti-large, or they're hitting you with something like a warp lightning cannon, then they're going to survive for quite a while. So now let me show you what Too Horrible to Die looks like. Look at his hit points. Low, 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 low. Green flash, back up. Now he's back up to 2,000. Okay, great. So I guess he's going to just run away and recover a little bit. And that's just, look at his health points going up from the regeneration as well. This unit's absolutely crazy in a prolonged fight, and he's stopped routing. I could send him back in again now if I really wanted to. So let's see exactly what it takes to take out a Hell Pit Abomination. Well, how about 8 warp fire cannons? So now we're going to be shooting a Hellfire Abomination. Let's see just how many hit points it loses. Okay, here we go. How many hit points is it down to? Well, it lost about a quarter there. That's not exactly too bad for either side, really. And this is a silly amount of artillery to have. This is pretty much as much artillery as you could take into the balanced multiplayer environment. But the Hell Pit Abomination actually has another feature, and that is, while it is also too horrible to die, when it actually does, clan rats come out. Well, actually, I should say Skaven slaves with spears come out, and they can be useful. Maybe you want to charge a Hell Pit Abomination into the enemy artillery, there it dies, then the Skaven slaves come out and finish the job. And so there you have it. That was my complete Skaven Army roster guide. They were the first faction that I played through for the campaign, so I thought it was fitting that I would do my first army guide on them. I thought they were very unique. They have such powerful artillery, such great meat shields, and yet still exceptional monstrous units. I personally had a lot of fun playing Skaven for my first campaign playthrough, and I think if you were to pick them, you'd probably have a lot of fun too. All it takes is a doom wheel and you're already having a great time. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, or maybe it was just useful to you. If it was, please give it a thumbs up, I'd really appreciate it. And stay tuned to the channel, as I'm going to be doing army guides like this one for the other 3 factions as well. And if you want to see an example of how the Skaven play through the campaign, then come along on twitch.tv/QuickyBaby. As this video is released, I'm just starting a campaign. And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.